So this is going to be just a recording on animating in Photoshop, and I'm going to stick with just doing frame by frame animations. Although there are two ways of doing animations in Photoshop and creating either animated GIFs or videos, and that is creating by frame animation, which as you see down here, create frame animation, but it's also video timeline. So you can do animations using the create video timeline. And with this animation, it's more like After Effects or Animate or some of those other applications where you have to use keyframes in order to create the kind of animation that you go in and kind of move throughout the timeline and switch positions. But that's a little bit more complicated. So we're going to stick with a frame by frame animation. For the frame by frame animation, what you're doing is using actual layers to create those frame by frame animations. So what I currently have here is a little bird, and I've taken the time to already cut this out and create a path, which when you guys choose an image to do this with, to create your animation, then what you want to do is make sure that you cut a path out first of whatever the object is. Or if you bring in, you can also bring in an object, character, whatever it is you want to move in already on a transparent layer. Right now, as you can see, this is just, a background layer. It's locked, so it's just one image. So we need to separate out this bird so that the bird is its own image. Now, to create the path, you can use for something like this where you don't have, or you do have, I should say, a lot of contrast between, the wings and the coloring of the bird and so on compared to the background. You could use something like your magnetic lasso tool where you could then go in and just draw the path all the way around this and create all the path that way. That's actually how I kind of started this, and then I went in and cleaned it up afterwards. You could also use your pen tool, which is down here somewhere, down here. So you could do the pen tool and go through and create points. That's going to be really hard and really time consuming, but you could do that and create somewhat of a layer. The other thing you could do is maybe even your quick selection tool might be able to go in here and kind of pick this up a little bit, clean it up a little bit, or the magic wand maybe even could go in. You could click on that and then maybe, click and select these sections around here and see if you could get a selection and then go in and kind of create a path out of that selection. So that almost went pretty good. So that almost looks pretty good. And then you could go in and invert this selection and then make a path out of it that way too. So that would be an easy way to do it if I go up to select and then inverse. Now you see I have the bird selected, and then I could go in and create a path out of the bird. So I could get my path tool up here and say create a new path or make a work path, however I want to do that. Anyway, I don't want to go and do that right now because I already have my path. So I don't want to duplicate the path and then get confused with all my paths here. So I'm just going to go ahead and deselect this. It's Command D to deselect. And then we're just going to go ahead and work with this path that I already currently have. All right. So to do that too, I'm going to unlock this layer and select this path. So unlock the layer to make sure that I have a background here that I can kind of function with. I don't want to be cutting things out here and have background colors back here and so on. So I just want to unlock that layer. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose my path up here. And now you see it's the path. So that was the path that I created earlier. The next thing I want to do with this is make this into a selection now that I have the path. So I want to go ahead and make it into a selection. And I can do that by going over here and saying make selection. And it's possible that you guys aren't seeing all of this because I'm not recording all of this, but if you just click up into the paths, let me move this over a little bit and then you'll be able to see it. All right, so I'm just going to go over here with that path selection and say make selection. I'm going to do a feathering of, 1 pixel. That's just to kind of smooth that selection out. Say okay. And now you see I have the marching ants here. So I have the selection. I select my layer. And I'm going to go ahead and name this layer background, because that's what it's going to be eventually. So I'm just going to name it background. And then I'll go ahead with that background layer selected and cut the bird out of here. So that's Command X, or you can go up and do Edit Cut. And I want to make sure that I'm doing a cut because I want to make sure that when I cut this, it's on my clipboard then. So remember, cut puts it on your clipboard. If I just did Command C, it would remain here. So I want to cut it out of here. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste it. When I paste it, it's going to make a whole new layer here. I'm going to call this a bird. For pasting, I just did Command V. V as in Victor. And you'll see that I use shortcuts a lot. So, if I do it and forget to tell you, but it is, of course, up here, Edit Paste. Now, the other thing that I need, so I've got my 2 layers here, but the other thing I want to do is I'm going to kind of move this out of the way here. And I want to make sure that I kind of clean this up because I want this to be now the background. So I want to fill this in. And the easiest way to do that and then kind of clean it up afterwards is to just go ahead and get your lasso tool and then drag around this shape here. And once you get all the way around it, then what you're going to do is just fill it with your Content Aware tool. You can do that too by Edit, Fill, Content Aware. So that's under there. If you go into Fill, you can do that too and still choose Content Aware. Content Aware, of course, is all this content that's around the outside of this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. And now that's going to get filled in with all of that color there. All right, so what I did there was I was on the wrong layer. I was going, well, that's interesting. So I want to make sure, and if all you guys would, when you're following along here, make sure that you choose your background layer. Now we're going to do Edit, Content Aware Fill, and now it'll fill in correctly. Say OK, and then it'll go ahead and fill that in. Now, it probably, sometimes it comes out a little more perfect. Actually, that's pretty perfect, isn't it? So sometimes it comes out a little more perfect than others, and you have to still kind of use your, stamp tool or something like that, or one of the healing brush or blending tools to get that to be a little more perfect. All right, I'm going to deselect that now into the fun part. So I'm going to move my bird back up here. And what this creates in the CC20 version is when you do your Edit, Content Aware Fill, it actually creates another layer with it. So you see we have 2 background layers, background layer copy here. So what I'm going to do is merge those 2 layers. So I'm going to click this bottom layer background and then hold down my Shift key or your Command key, one or the other, and select the other layer. And then Command E is merging the layers, Command E, or it's also up here under here. You can go in here and say merge layers. And now we have the background layer on there. All right, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead in here and create, um, move this bird around. So we want to start, what I like to do here is to use the puppet warp to go in and kind of move the wings. So underneath here with your bird layer selected, go up under your edit, and then under there is your puppet warp. So I'm going to go ahead and say puppet warp. And that's going to give you this whole big mesh thing here. Now you can go up here and you can expand your mesh and you can play with, the normalities here of your density and your mode. You can expand this to being other pixels for the mesh. You can turn off the mesh if you want to. There are all sorts of things, all sorts of options you're going to get up here. And I'm not going to cover all of them. That's for you guys to kind of explore, because for this, you don't really need a lot of them. Now, what I want to do is, what you do now is you kind of place pins around, and you need to think about this. And a lot of this has to do with what are you going to move? What do you want to, what do you want to distort? What do you want not to distort? What do you want to kind of be an anchor, and so on. So I'm going to say, well, okay, I want to move this part of my wing. So I want to kind of move that up as it's flying. And I want to kind of give some stability to that. So I'm going to put an anchor point somewhere around in here. So as it's moving, I've got kind of, a little bit flexibility in here. Then I need to make sure that the body doesn't necessarily move. So I'm going to put 2 more anchor points here to kind of hold the body together, that tail together. And I want to do the same on this side with the tail. The other thing I want to anchor is my head. So I'm going to put kind of where the beginning of the head starts here. I'm going to put a point there. I'm going to put another point here at the top of the head and another point here. And now I'm just going to kind of copy the same over here. So I want to do 1 anchor point somewhere around here, and another anchor point, or pin, I should call them. I'm getting into the using anchor point as it's part of After Effects and so on to put anchor points and keyframes and so on. But anyway, so there you go. So now we got all these points. And now you'll notice with this that these now move. So if I roll over this pin, I can now move this wing back and forth and up and down. Now I'm not going to do that yet. I'm instead going to make this into a smart object. So I'm going to go on to that layer, and I'm going to go in here and say to create a smart object. Looks like it's not letting me quite do that, because I didn't move it. Let me do a smart object first, and then I'll put the pins in there again. So don't know why I'm not getting the option. Oh, here, sorry, convert to smart object. All right, now I'm gonna put my puppet warp on here again. So guys, do the smart object first. I'm sorry about that. I wanted to do that afterwards, but it wouldn't let me while I was already in the puppet tool there. So go in first step first, okay, and convert it to a smart object. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and real quickly do my puppet, since I already explained to you where I wanted all my pins and why. So I'm just going to quickly go in here and put in all my pins. Anchor my body. And then pin here, pin up here. And then we'll go ahead and commit that so I can use my check mark up here. And now you see you get your smart filters, and your puppet warp is on here. So if I double click on puppet warp, that will give me all my anchor points and everything. So then I can just go in and readjust them. All right, so what's the purpose of this, right? I just hit return to get out of that. I had double clicked on Puppet Warp, and then I went ahead in there and just hit return. All right, well, I'm going to duplicate this layer now. So I've got the pins on here. I have this bird in this one position. And now I'm going to go ahead in and say duplicate layer. And when that's duplicated, it'll just come up bird copy. And I can rename that. I could say bird 2 or something if I wanted to. You know, it's up to you if you want to go in and rename them. Probably easier to rename them because you don't want to have like bird copy, 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 bird copy, 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 copy. All right, so just name it bird 2. Then go ahead and double click on the second bird. So bird 2, double click on your Puppet Warp. And now what we're going to do is start the motion of this. So I'm going to start bringing these down. So I'm going to move the wings. And you'll be able to see underneath it where the other wing is. So you can kind of get an idea of how you're moving this and what it's going to look like as you move it. So I'm going to go ahead in and kind of just keep moving it just a little bit, because you're going to do several motions like this. And you want to make sure that you're creating kind of a smooth transition from one to the next. So you don't want any huge movements. And then I'm going to go ahead and commit that, hit my check mark. And now you see that I've got these 2 wings. So here's the first, here's the second. So you can see how this is going to play out as we go ahead in and we start creating this timeline from these frames. All right, I'm going to duplicate now this second one. So I'm going to go in and say duplicate layer. I'm going to call this bird 3. And then I'm going to go ahead, say OK. And I'm going to double click on the puppet. And once again, I will go ahead and move this one now and move it down from that second layer. And I can see just as because I've done this several times, I can see that this one here, this one that I put in here quickly, probably should have been over here a little bit more. So I'm going to get like a little bit of a rough kind of movement here. And I only know that because I've done so many of these animations that I just kind of know that that's going to happen because it's not tight enough up here underneath the wing. So keep that in mind for any of you that are following along here. All right, I'm going to commit that. I just hit return to commit it. I'm going to make another copy here. And I'm going to go ahead in here and just kind of keep doing this. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. This one I'm going to call 4. And then say OK. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and double click on the Puppet Warp to get to the warp. And once again, I'm going to go ahead in and kind of move these around. So again, with this one, keep in mind that when you start doing these, after you do it a bit, you may have to, kind of move the pins around and stop. Now, for the pins too, less is more. I can't stress that enough. You don't want 15 million pins on here thinking that you're going to be able to get this really smooth, nice transition with 15 pins, or 20 pins or 30 pins. I wouldn't want to go into this wing and put in like 10 pins along here in the wing. It's going to make for a really rough transition. It's going to warp everything. So what you really want to think about is, where are you going to have movement? If, let's say, you have a leg and you want movement in the knee, and you want movement in the ankle, and you want movement in the thigh area, you would put a pin in the thigh, in the knee, in the ankle. If you want just the ankle kind of, or the foot to kind of move up and down, and then the thigh, you would have to have a pin in the thigh. That would actually be your anchor. So that pin in the thigh would be anchoring that there so that you get the proper rotation. And then you would just have the pin in your foot, or the pin in the foot and the knee. It just depends on what you want to have bending. So you need to really think that through. What do you want to have that's going to move. And then what's going to be the anchor for that? All right, I'm going to hit return on this. Now you can see that I've got 4 going here. And if I turn these on kind of quickly, you'll see that this is kind of how it's moving. I did go in and I did about 20 layers. So that's what I did to get kind of a really nice smooth transition that brings the wing all the way down in here. And then once I animate it, I can also bring the wing all the way back up. And I'll show you that in 1 second. So I'm going to open up that file. And also, you guys, I'm going to give you these files. So these will be loaded onto your, onto the internet there. All right. So here's the one I did with 20 layers. Again, it's the same thing. Each one is the same thing. Now with the 20, I got them a little bit closer together too. So I wasn't as broad with this. I only moved them a little teeny bit. And the whole idea of that is depending on how smooth you want the transition, how smooth do you want the wing to come down and go back up? Do you want it jerky or do you want it, you know, really smooth? If you want it really smooth, then you're going to have to go to the work of doing several different layers in order to get that smoothness out of there. Now I'm also going to delete, I have up at the top here, and before I give you guys this file, I'm actually going to give you this one that doesn't have the text and stuff in there because I just want kind of a clean layer here. All right, and I will save this one just so again I have that without the text and stuff in there. So we don't want that. I'm waiting for it to save. All right, down at the bottom here now, where I got this window is you have to go up to Window and then Timeline. And that's where I got this. So Window, Timeline. And that'll give you this timeline here. Now, we do not want the video timeline. And you'll see there's a little arrow right here to switch this. So what you want to do is click on that, switch this to create frame animation. Now, not only create frame animation, now that you have that in the window, but you have to click on it. So I got to select this now, which I'm going to do. And now you see once I click on it, I have 1 frame comes in here that has all these layers. Well, what I want is a whole bunch of frames with all these layers. So what I want to do is go in here and say to make frames from all of these layers. So I'm going to click on that. And now you see all of these layers that I have up here. They're all now frames. If I hit my play, you'll see it play. Okay. It's kind of smooth because I have so many. And the only downfall right at the moment, as I'm sure you saw, is that the background is on the first frame, but it's not on any other frames. So depending on what you want all these frames to look like is what you do for each one of these when they come up is you have to go in and click on this to show on each one of these. So what I want to do is go in here, this original I don't need. I can delete. And now, whoops, no, I can't because that was actually the first frame. I saw here when I deleted that it was the first frame. So don't do that. All right, but on each one of these other layers here, I need this background layer to show. So what I want to do is click on these frames and then make visible the background layer. All right, and then I'm going to click on my next one here and just make sure that in each one of these that background layer is showing. All right, so I'm going to click on the next one. show the background layer. Click on my next frame here, show the background layer. Click on the next frame, show the background layer. Now we can try, I assume that with this new one, so that we don't have to do it frame by frame, that if I choose every single one of these, and with the 2020, you used to have to do kind of frame by frame by frame, but with the 2020 version, you can just go and click on the background for all of these, and now you've got it in each frame. And so now when I play this, I'll go ahead and hit right down here, and let me just show you here for what all these are here. So this particular one here is going to show you kind of the frame by frame timeline, which we don't want. So don't click on that. I only knew how to get out of it because I am me. So I knew that clicking on that, I knew it was going to pop up the timeline thing there. Anyway, forever, you can choose that, or you can do 3 times or once, or you can say other and put in there whatever you want. That's how many times do you want this to keep looping, 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 and keep playing? Or do you just want to go through your animation one time and then stop? The next one here is to go select the first frame. So if I clicked on that, it would go back to the very first frame, which right now we need to get rid of, right? Sorry, we need to get rid of that frame, not the whole layer. Sorry, they move things around in these newer versions, and then I'm delete frame. So that's over in here. So again, you have kind of in here in your timeline, you've got, this panel, hamburger panel, we call it. And if you click on that, then that's where you get all of these options for, flattening frames or make frames from layers or whatever. So this particular frame, we want to just delete it because we don't want to have a blank frame there. All right, so now we've got this. If I play it, you'll see that it's playing well. I'm going to pause it. The next one here is to go to the last frame. And then you've got motion tweening, which you don't want to use. Well, you can experiment with it. I shouldn't say you don't want to use it, but you can experiment with it. And you can add, different frames, duplicate the frame next to it. If you want to have something to pause, then, maybe on this particular frame here, let's say frame 8, that you want to pause it and you want to add some more frames that duplicate that, you can do that. And then the last is trashing your frames. And I actually could have used this trash can here to delete that one frame that I deleted instead of going over here. All right, the next thing I'm going to do, so now we've got that playing and that looks good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these frames. I'm just holding down my shift key. So I clicked on frame 1, held down my shift key, and then click on frame 18. And then with that, I'm going to go ahead into here, into where my drop-down panel is with all my choices right here. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say copy frames. So I have all of those frames copied. I'm going to click on the very last frame here. And then I'm going to go ahead in here and say paste frames. You're going to get a pop-up window that's going to say, where do you want to place them? So you can paste them, replace the frames, these frames that are here. You can paste over selection. You can paste before selection. I'm going to paste after this selection. So I want all these frames coming in after this. I'm going to say, okay. Now all these are already selected for you. So you can not click anywhere and delete them all, because they're all selected. And so before you deselect anything or click on another frame, you can go ahead into your drop-down panel again and then say reverse frames. All right, so now all these frames are reversed. Well, what does that do? Well, you'll see it makes this all go back the other way. So I'm going to start play this from frame 1. And there you go. Your bird is flying. Pretty cool, huh? All right, and for this assignment, I'll stop that. For this assignment, what you're going to be doing is once you have your bird in here and you've got, or whatever you do. So now for this assignment, you can have anything you want to have moving across whatever scene you want to have it move across. I could actually take this whole file here, copy it with all your animations and everything, and paste, or the easier way to go about it would be to take this background that you have here and replace it with something else if you want to replace it. So that would be the ideal thing to do. Now, if any of you want to, and you can replace it with, a whole other scene if you want it flying through, if you wanted a bird here and you wanted it flying through, a neighborhood or something, or flying onto something. Or you just want to do something really, really simple because you're just experimenting and you don't want to get all excited and try to do, something way out there that you don't have time for. If I had more time, I'd show you some really fun things here that we can do. But what you'll do with this then is once you have this ready to go, you're going to go up and do a file export. And what you can do is you have all different kinds of ways to render this video. You don't want like a PNG or anything like that because that'll flatten everything. But we'll say render video. And then in here, you're going to go ahead and choose what you want to render this at. If it'll come up. While I'm waiting on that, I want to point out that if, say, you have a person, and you can do this with illustrations, you could do a cat illustration and have a cat walking or something. You could do it with illustrations of people, or a ball that maybe you want to illustrate across the screen and you want to move the ball across the screen. So you could do that where, each layer was a ball in a very different position. A lot of times we'll begin, or I do begin with, bouncing a ball. And so I'll go in and have students just move each layer. The ball moves a little further, a little further, a little further. And then, comes back or whatever it does, or it bounces and then goes off the screen or something like that. So, I mean, it just depends on what your vision is, whatever it is you want. What I want to say is that if you do something like a person, and I'll kind of see if I can show you or kind of get you to visualize this, but if you have, say, a cat, and let's kind of describe it that way. If you have a cat and you have 4 paws and you want the 4 paws moving so it looks like the cat, you use the puppet warp tool on each one of the paws and you want the paws looking like they're moving. What you need to make sure is that that picture of that cat, or the illustration of the cat, that all 4 paws are separated, so that, in other words, that you can see all 4 paws. Because if you just have 4 paws and they're connected to the body in such a way that it's, one picture and you don't have that separation of those legs, then you won't be able to do it, because this, Photoshop doesn't see them as a leg. unless they see it as the entire photo. So you have to be able to go in and make sure that you separate out whatever pictures you choose, that your legs are separate, that you can see all four separately. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and with this, hang on one second because I got somebody contacting me. All right, sorry, I'm back. So what you can do here, I mean, you have several different options. So you can go in here and do an H.264. You can do a QuickTime movie. What we recommend always is to just do an H.264. That's the lowest quality that we can get. The document size in this case is this 2800 by 1867. And you know, if you click on document size, what we want to do is do an NTSC DV, and that's just standard, and that's usually what goes on to YouTube. And it'll also create a lot smaller size. It's automatically going to create a 720 by 480. The rest of this you don't need to change. So H.264, then change this to NTSC DV, and that's it. And then you're just going to go ahead and render that file. And that's going to go ahead and create that movie for you. And that's the one that you're going to go ahead and upload to Canvas. All right, and that's it. I would say at this point, does anybody have any questions? But since it's a video recording, you can't answer me. So I'll stop the recording and post this along with these files so you can practice this particular exercise before you go ahead and do your assignment.